There's this lake my brother and I used to fish when we were kids. We'd bring crickets or worms and catch tons of bluegill. Those early days are why I still love fishing. The lake wasn't popular, probably because it was hard to reach. You had to hike through the woods to get there. But that's what made it special. It felt like our own hidden place. Most people fish at dawn, but my brother and I preferred the night. We'd head out as the sun set, stay until the moon lit the water, and enjoy the quiet. That Friday night was no different. We set up on our favorite rocks, lines ready, the lake calm as ever. It was something we'd done hundreds of times before everything changed. As we were fishing, something on the far side of the lake caught my eye. It wasn't a splash, not the kind you'd expect from a fish, but a slow, steady movement that rippled across the water like a silent breath. At first, I thought it was just a big bass or maybe a turtle surfacing, but the ripples kept spreading, wide and heavy, like something much larger was moving underneath. I pointed it out to my brother JJ, and both of us leaned forward, squinting through the dim light. The sky was turning this deep blue, the kind that tells you the sun's gone and the night is about to take over. We couldn't see clearly across the lake, but whatever was causing those ripples, it was big. And it wasn't stopping. Then, all at once, something started to rise from the center of those ripples. At first, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. A dark shape slowly pushing out of the water, standing upright. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then, when the shape took form, I realized it wasn't a fish at all. It was a person. It's hard to explain how strange that moment was. Imagine being out there, miles away from the nearest house, surrounded by woods, the only sound being the faint buzz of insects and the quiet slap of water. Then seeing a human figure just standing there, half submerged in the middle of the lake. My brain didn't even want to believe it. JJ must have realized it too, because I heard him mutter a curse under his breath at the same time I did. The idea that someone else was out there, someone who had been completely underwater just moments before, was impossible to ignore. Whoever that was had been under for a long time, long enough that we should have seen them come up earlier. That realization alone sent chills up my spine. I wanted to pack up right then and leave, but JJ wasn't ready to go. He laughed it off, saying the person was way too far to bother us and that maybe it was just someone swimming. I didn't agree, but I didn't argue either. So we sat there, watching. The figure was moving now, swaying slowly, almost rhythmically, like they were drifting with the water instead of fighting it. There was something unsettlingly graceful about the way they moved, like they weren't even swimming, they were part of the lake itself. It didn't look human anymore, not really, just smooth, deliberate motions that made the surface of the water shimmer in the moonlight. We forgot all about our fishing rods. We just stared. I remember whispering, "What are they doing?" But JJ didn't answer. He was transfixed, his face blank, his eyes wide and unblinking. I reached into the water absent-mindedly just to ground myself and instantly pulled my hand back. The water was ice cold. No sane person would be swimming in that. You think they're fishing? I asked weakly, trying to joke. JJ shook his head, not taking his eyes off the lake. I tried again to distract him, told him to focus on the lines, but he didn't move. His mouth was slightly open, and I realized he wasn't even holding his pole anymore. For a moment, he looked like he was hypnotized. I said his name once, then louder the second time. Finally, he blinked and turned to me, mumbling an apology before picking up his rod again. But we both knew the mood had changed. We weren't really fishing anymore, we were just waiting. For what, I didn't know. A few quiet minutes passed. I tried to keep my eyes on my bobber, but I couldn't stop glancing across the lake. The figure was still there, still moving slowly, as if floating in place. Then suddenly, without a sound, it slipped beneath the surface again. Gone. I froze, expecting it to reappear any second, but it didn't. The water was perfectly still, like nothing had ever been there. JJ pulled out his phone and opened the stopwatch app. "Let's see how long," he said quietly. I watched the timer climb. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2. Nothing. I started to feel uneasy, my skin prickling with every passing second. 2 minutes underwater? I whispered. That's impossible. JJ shrugged and said maybe it was someone training, some kind of freediver. I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. The idea was ridiculous. A diver out here, at night, in near freezing water, in the middle of nowhere? That wasn't training, that was suicide. By the time JJ's timer hit 3 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. "We're leaving," I said, standing up and grabbing my gear. But before I could take another step, JJ grabbed my arm. "Wait," he said. "Look!" I followed his gaze back toward the lake and saw the ripples again, but this time they weren't far away, they were closer. Much closer. Maybe a fifth of the way across now. My heart skipped a beat. That meant whoever, or whatever it was, had swum nearly all the way across the lake, underwater, for over 3 minutes. My voice came out sharper than I intended when I told JJ again that we needed to go. He didn't argue this time. We both stood frozen in place as the water began to stir again. The surface broke and a head emerged, then shoulders, then a face. The moonlight caught her features and I realized it was a woman. Not some old hermit or a lost hiker, but a young woman, maybe our age, with long dark hair plastered to her face and a green swimsuit clinging to her skin. She looked almost perfect, like she didn't belong in that murky water at all. For a brief second, I felt my fear melt away. She smiled at us, a soft, almost playful smile that made it hard to think straight. She said hi. Her voice carried across the lake, clear and smooth, almost melodic. It sounded wrong for the setting, like hearing laughter in a graveyard. JJ and I just stood there, stunned. Then JJ called out, asking what she was doing. Swimming, she said simply, tilting her head back. Obviously. He laughed awkwardly and asked if she was training for something. She smirked. Something like that, she said, then started gliding closer toward us. Her movements were effortless, too smooth, like the water itself was carrying her. When she got close enough for us to see her eyes, she asked, "Do you want to join me?" It wasn't even flirty. It was wrong. Her voice sounded too calm, too inviting. I finally snapped out of it and shouted back that she was crazy, that the water was freezing. She just laughed, a soft, musical sound that made my skin crawl. "You'll get used to it," she said, her tone light, teasing. JJ shook his head, clearly freaked out now. The woman stopped moving and put a finger to her lips, studying us. The smile faded, her eyes darkened, and for the first time, I felt real fear. Something about the way she looked at us. It wasn't human. It was like she was thinking, calculating. My instincts screamed to run. I grabbed JJ's arm and said we were leaving. She didn't say anything at first. Then, as we started backing away, she screamed. It was a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't just loud, it was violent, a scream that seemed to split the air apart. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my gear. She kept screaming, over and over, shouting for us to come back, to get in the water with her. Her voice was raw, desperate, angry, and then, suddenly, it turned into shrieking. Not words, just pure animal noise, like someone being tortured. The sound echoed through the trees as we ran. JJ was already calling the cops by the time we reached the car. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold his phone. When they asked us to stay nearby, he hung up and started the engine instead. I didn't argue. I couldn't. My heart was still pounding, my ears still ringing from that scream. As we pulled away, I glanced back one last time at the lake through the trees. The moonlight was dim, but I swear I could still see her, half submerged, watching us leave. You'd think that night would have kept us from ever going back, and for a while it did. But curiosity has a way of winning. We eventually returned, this time with our dad. He didn't believe us at first, but after enough convincing, he came along, wanting to see for himself. We never saw her again. The lake stayed quiet, calm, almost too normal, like nothing had ever happened there. After that, it became an inside joke between my brother and me. Every time we fished that lake, one of us would whisper, "I think she's coming back." But deep down, I knew what we saw wasn't a joke. The more time passed, the more wrong it all felt. Maybe she was just someone unwell, or maybe something else entirely. My name's Jay, and fishing has always been one of life's greatest pleasures for me. I'll take any chance to get out on the water, lake, river, or the marshes here in Louisiana. This happened about 2 months ago, when I went marsh fishing for speckled trout with my buddy Angel. We'd done it plenty of times before, so nothing about that morning felt unusual. The marsh was shallow and quiet, perfect for our two-person kayak. It was early spring, cold air, colder water, but we didn't care. After about 30 minutes of paddling, we found a perfect empty spot. No other fishermen around, just us and the sound of water. We cracked open a couple of beers, cast our lines, and settled in, enjoying the peace and silence. before things took a turn we never expected. We had been fishing for maybe an hour when Angel hooked something big. The rod bent hard, the line cut through the water, and for a second, I thought he'd landed a monster. He leaned too far over the side of the kayak to get a better angle, too eager to see what he'd caught. I opened my mouth to warn him, but before I could say a word, I saw his phone slip right out of his jacket pocket and disappear into the muddy water with a quiet splash. Gone. Just like that. Angel cursed so loud the sound echoed across the marsh. He had insurance, sure, but not for a phone that was completely lost underwater. The replacement alone would have cost him hundreds. Money he didn't have. I couldn't blame him. I wouldn't have taken it well either. I told him we could try to find it, even though the water was so murky you could barely see a few inches down. So we stayed there, poking at the bottom with our paddles, trying to feel for something hard. For 20 long minutes we stirred up nothing but mud and weeds. The water looked dead and brown, swallowing everything we touched. The more we searched, the less sure we were about where the phone had even fallen. Finally, I told Angel it was hopeless, that we should just forget it and enjoy what was left of the day. But he wasn't having it. He shook his head and said, "I'm not leaving without it." Before I could stop him, he kicked off his shoes and started peeling off his pants. "What are you doing?" I asked, but I already knew. He said he was going in to feel around with his feet. I thought it was stupid, but also not the worst idea. Maybe he'd get lucky. The moment he stepped into the water, he gasped and cursed again. "It's freezing," he hissed, his teeth already chattering. That part of the marsh was deeper than we'd realized, about 4.5 feet, judging by where the water hit him. Still, he started moving slowly, feeling with his toes, sweeping in circles, his face tense with focus. I sat there in the kayak, watching, my patience thinning as minutes passed with no sign of success. The cold had to be getting to him, and I was ready to tell him to quit when everything changed. It happened fast. One moment he was upright, and the next he vanished. His whole body jerked forward like he'd been tripped. Then he went completely under. No sound, no splash, just gone. For a second, I thought maybe he'd slipped or died for the phone, but the seconds dragged on, and he didn't come back up. That's when panic hit me. I tore off my jacket and kicked off my shoes, ready to jump in, when Angel suddenly erupted from the water, gasping, covered in mud and marsh weeds. His face was twisted in pure terror. "Go!" he shouted. "Get us out of here now!" I didn't ask questions. I grabbed his arm, hauled him into the kayak, and started paddling like hell. The boat rocked with every stroke, but I didn't stop until we were far away from that spot. Angel was shaking hard, not just from the cold, but from something else. He kept looking back over his shoulder, eyes wide, breathing heavy, like he expected something to come up behind us. I asked what happened, what pulled him under, but he could barely talk. When he finally did, his voice was low and shaky. He said something had grabbed him by the ankle and yanked him down. At first, I thought he meant a fish, maybe a big catfish or an alligator gar, but Angel said no. He said it didn't feel like that. It wasn't a bite or a tug. It felt like something had wrapped around his ankle, tight, strong, almost human, but not quite. It wasn't a hand, he said, but it wasn't anything else I can describe. Whatever it was, it tried to drag him deeper into the marsh. He said he kicked and fought with everything he had until finally it let go. His leg was covered in red marks, like something had gripped it hard. We called it a day and headed straight back to the boat launch. Angel didn't speak the entire way. He just stared at the water, pale and shaking, his fingers clenched around the side of the kayak. I tried to reason with him, saying maybe it was some kind of big fish or a tangled root he'd mistaken for something else, but he didn't respond. He just kept shaking his head. He told me later, in a voice I barely recognized, that whatever had grabbed him wasn't an animal. It felt alive, but wrong. Even now, I can't explain what happened. I fished those marshes my whole life, and nothing like that has ever come close. I went home that night and tried to convince myself it was all in our heads. Maybe the cold water, the darkness, the stress. But the look on Angel's face told me otherwise. He wasn't making it up. And to this day, every time I paddle out there, I can't help but stare into that same muddy water, wondering what's still waiting beneath the surface. I'll admit, ever since that day, marsh fishing hasn't felt the same. Every time I push my kayak into that still water, there's this uneasiness that never leaves. Fishing is supposed to be peaceful, something that clears your mind, but now I can't stop thinking about what might be hiding down there. Maybe it was just my imagination? Maybe it wasn't. Sometimes I catch myself glancing over the side of the kayak, half expecting to see something staring back from below, and I can't help but wonder, what if Angel didn't escape that thing completely? What if it's still there, waiting for the next unlucky person who steps into its water? The girls were laughing, arguing about whether to take a quick swim when Kat suddenly froze. She squinted toward the far bank and said, "Do you guys see that canoe?" We all turned. Sure enough, a small canoe sat wedged in the reeds near the shoreline. It was tilted awkwardly, half in the water, half out, like it had drifted there on its own. We'd been to this reservoir countless times, and none of us had ever seen it before. Nick and I exchanged a look. Curiosity got the best of us. The girls waved us off, happy with their drinks and music, while we walked the short distance down the bank. The closer we got, the stranger it looked. It wasn't just some empty canoe left behind. Someone had clearly been using it, recently. A fishing rod leaned against the side, line still hanging in the water. An open tackle box lay scattered with hooks and lures. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the seat, still wrapped in plastic. But the thing that sent a chill through me was the phone. It was sitting right in the middle of the seat, flashlight on, beam shining into the water. The screen was locked, but the light was fresh. Who leaves their phone behind like that? I whispered. Nick didn't answer, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing. Everything else. The sandwich, the gear, but not that note. No one runs off and abandons their phone. It doesn't sound terrifying now, but in that moment it felt thickly wrong. The air felt thick, like the whole place was holding its breath. We looked around, expecting to see someone nearby, but the woods were silent. The water barely moved. Even the bugs had quieted down. Nick finally said, "Let's go tell the girls," and I didn't argue. As I described what we found, the uneasy feeling only grew. Every detail, the open box, the sandwich, the glowing phone, replayed in my mind, heavier each time. I glanced back toward the canoe and could swear it had drifted slightly, rocking against the reeds like something unseen was nudging it. Kat said she wanted to leave, and honestly, I was relieved. We started packing up. Then Megan gasped and pointed across the reservoir. "Look," she said. On the far side of the water stood a person, knee-deep in the reservoir, perfectly still. Even though the sun had just set, I could see them clearly. They were facing us, holding something long in their hands. Maybe a fishing rod, maybe a stick, but they weren't moving. They were just watching. A cold wave ran through me. The canoe, the phone, the silence. It all connected in my head at once. None of us spoke, but I could feel the same thought in everyone's eyes. "We need to leave now." We started gathering our stuff as quietly as possible, but before we could even move, the man shouted. His voice echoed across the water, deep and angry, yelling that we shouldn't be there. "We're leaving," Nick shouted back, but the man didn't stop. He kept screaming, his voice breaking into wild curses, like he was completely unhinged. Then, without warning, he dropped whatever he was holding and started moving. Fast. Straight into deeper water. For a second, I thought he'd stop, but he didn't. He dove in and began swimming toward us. That's when the panic hit. "Run!" I shouted. We grabbed our things and bolted up the bank, stumbling over rocks and branches, hearts pounding so loud it drowned everything else out. The hole in the fence felt miles away. I was in the back, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. The splashing behind us was getting louder, closer. I didn't look back again, I just ran. We reached the fence, squeezing through one by one. I was the last one out, and as I crawled through, I could still hear him, the splashing, then shouting again. But I didn't dare turn around. Once we made it to the car, no one spoke. We slammed the doors, locked them, and just sat there in Megan's driveway, breathing hard. Kat was crying, Nick was pacing, and Megan just stared out the windshield in silence. My hands were still shaking. We tried to make sense of it all. Who that person was, why the canoe was abandoned, and why the phone was still shining in the dark. I wondered if the man was the canoe's owner. If so, why was he all the way across the water instead of near it? And why had he left everything behind? Or worse, maybe the canoe wasn't his at all. Maybe it belonged to someone else. Someone who wasn't there anymore. Megan pointed out something that made it even creepier. If he'd done something to whoever owned the canoe, why would he draw attention to himself by chasing us? Kat wanted to call the police. But what would we even say? That we'd been trespassing and found an abandoned canoe, then got yelled at to leave? No one would believe us. So we didn't call. We just sat there in the dark, the music still faintly playing from someone's phone, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I kept replaying that image in my head, the person standing in the water, perfectly still, watching us. The worst part is, sometimes I wonder if he wasn't yelling at us to get out, maybe he was yelling to warn us, because something else was still in that reservoir. It's been a few months since that night, and none of us have gone back to the reservoir. Part of me still wants to, just to see if there's any sign of what really happened, but I can't convince Nick or the girls to come with me. Honestly, maybe that's for the best. Some things are better left alone. Still, I don't think I'll ever forget how that place felt. The silence, the still water, and that figure standing in it, watching us leave. So tell me, what do you think was really going on out there? Was it just some angry trespasser, or something darker hiding beneath the surface? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more true stories that'll keep you up tonight, don't go anywhere. Watch the next video on the channel. It's even more chilling than this one.